Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Cohen. I am the founder and executive director of the Beagle Alliance. As most of you know, we record these town halls and get them up on our site. So please consider sharing as we go along. We always have the most amazing guests. And tonight we have Justin Goodman from White Coat Waste, Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy. I'm going to add a couple of things to that I'm not going to do Justin justice, but I'm going to do my best. Okay. So 2017, the 40 Under 40 Award for American Association of Political Consultants. Your efforts have helped pass local, state, and federal laws and policies. You've co-authored peer reviews. And I'm going to add my own personal that you and your wife, Stacy, are just general badasses in a good way, period. And we need you here in Canada. So hi, Justin. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And I also see, it's nice to see some smiling faces. I see some names of people I know in here. Lindsay at Rise and Amy in Wisconsin. So that's nice. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here and talk about some of what we've uncovered that's going on north of the border.
Awesome. So you have a presentation, and as many of you know, when we do these town halls, you can certainly raise the virtual hand, which I will try to man. Put anything in the chat, but in general, we're pretty casual, and we'd rather hear you talk and see your face. So if you're into that, that's great. But I'll leave it to you for now, Justin, to start the presentation.
Well, yeah. Would you prefer I take questions during, or do you want me to wait till the end to do that? How do you...
We usually, you know what? It's a mix. So if somebody wants, if you're okay with it and somebody has something based on what you've said as we go along, we're pretty casual. I'll kind of watch the hands, but in general, for the most part, they're usually at the end. Most people wait to the end anyway, so.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. And thanks everyone for being here. And the Beagle Alliance is doing such incredible work that I'm just, thrilled to be here supporting what they do and thinking about how we might collaborate more. So I'm going to share my screen. Lori and I tested it and it worked okay. So let's cross our fingers here.
Exactly.
Present. I'll just make sure it's working properly. Okay. So can everyone see that? I think it looks all right.
Yeah, it looks great.
Like Lori said, I'm Justin Goodman. I live in Annapolis, Maryland, which is near Annapolis, Maryland, which is about an hour from Washington, D.C. I'm the Senior Vice President of White Coat Waste, so I oversee all of our communications work, working with the press, developing investigations, and also all our policy work. I'm a lobbyist. I work on our investigations, and then I work with the press and lawmakers to raise awareness and get policy changes at federal agencies and pass laws. And obviously, we're a US-based organization. We have members all around the country. We have supporters all around the world. And I'm going to talk generally a little bit about what we do, but I'm also going to focus a lot of the presentation on things we've been uncovering in Canada that are being funded by the US government. Now, I've been doing this about 20 years. I got my start as a student activist in the early 2000s at the University of Connecticut. And my wife and I discovered there was a monkey lab on campus. And this was 2004. And it seemed like such an archaic thing, even 20 plus years ago, we couldn't even believe that was still happening. So we kind of made it our life's mission to expose and shut this lab down, and using the Freedom of Information Act and other public resources, we did an investigation, launched a campaign, and fast forward a couple of years, the lab shut down. And actually, for the first time in history, an animal lab had to return money to the federal government for breaking the law. This happened when we were students, when I was a student. And I thought, I was in a PhD program, and I thought my heart is really in advocacy and activism and not academia. So I have been now working in the movement to end animal testing full time for this is my 20th year, I think. So the realization I came to when working on that investigation, of course, I'd heard about product testing, cosmetics testing on animals like so many other people have, and you still do if you're on social media. But when we worked on this monkey campaign, what I discovered was really the biggest problem when it comes to animal testing, at least in the United States, is the US government. this is a funny poster we made a few years ago. That's the face of the former NIH director, Francis Collins, and it's a take on the wartime poster from World War II. I want you to pay for animal experiments, because here in the United States, we spend about $20 billion a year in US taxpayers' money on animal testing, 20 billion with a B. And 2/3 of all animal testing in the United States is funded by taxpayer dollars. And actually, the National Institutes of Health, the US National Institutes of Health, is the single largest funder of animal testing in the entire world. So it goes way beyond just what's happening in the 50 states and US territories. And hundreds of laboratories around the world, US tax dollars are being spent to abuse animals in these outdated experiments. So our mission is different than some other organizations. We work only on government-funded animal testing, which, like I mentioned, is about 2/3 of all of it. So it's we're trying to take the biggest bite out of the problem. And we don't try to ban animal tests. We try to cut their funding, because the way to make them go away is to just cut the revenue stream off. And our challenge to them is go find your own money somewhere else, but stop making taxpayers pay for it. And we find time and again that when you cut the funding for these projects, they simply go away, because no one's going to be willingly funding these type of abusive experiments. So our model, because we work on federal policy, FED, find, expose, and defund. And I'm going to kind of talk you through what our methods are and some of the things we've uncovered. Again, with a slight bent towards what we've been working on with regard to Canada. So first, F, find, that's kind of the investigation stage of what we do. And we have researchers who work on staff, and they spend all day filing Freedom of Information Act requests, reviewing government databases, reviewing peer-reviewed papers, working with whistleblowers and working with government agencies to uncover what's actually happening with our tax dollars in these laboratories. So, for example, we started an investigation in 2019. We call it Worldwide Waste. It's one of our big campaigns where we started looking at laboratories the US government was funding around the world. This is a screenshot taken this morning of the NIH's website. The US NIH currently funds or considers eligible for funding 45 different animal laboratories in Canada. I asked ChatGPT for a little help. I think 7 provinces of Canada, of the 10 provinces, are represented on this list. And I'm happy to share these slides so you can see some of the names, some big universities, some smaller ones, some government-related entities as well. So 45 Canadian animal laboratories are currently eligible for or actively getting funding from the US government specifically for animal testing. And if we dig down a little deeper, after we did our initial investigation into this government funding for foreign laboratories, members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, came together and they asked the Government Oversight Office to do a report, basically an audit of how much money the National Institutes of Health was sending to these laboratories in foreign countries. And this is what they found in a 2023 audit. Overall, they found over $2 billion spent over a 10-year period in these foreign labs. Specifically with regard to Canada, Canada was the single largest recipient of US funding for foreign animal laboratories specifically. About $170 million went to Canadian animal testing laboratories from the US government over this 10-year period. And this is the floor, not the ceiling, because this only is looking at direct funding, grants and contracts. I'll talk a little bit about how a lot of the money that goes to these laboratories is not direct funding. Sometimes you get money going to a US laboratory and then they subcontract out work to laboratories in Canada, which means they fly under the radar a bit. It's harder to follow the money in those cases because there's less transparency about it. But this is a screenshot from a US government audit that was done, released in 2023, showing that Canadian animal laboratories received about 500 different grants and contracts totaling over $170 million. And again, there's probably, I would ballpark maybe another $30 or $50 million, potentially more, that went indirectly to these laboratories as well.
So Justin, this is
Yes.
a public, like I literally took a screenshot of this because this is so important. This is obviously public. We can make this public if you're sharing it now. I mean, this is astonishing. And I mean, most Canadians don't know animal testing happens in Canada, let alone all this behind the scenes.
Yeah. And Yeah, it's disturbing. I mean, it's disturbing for me here in the US that my money is being not only spent in these laboratories across the United States, but also in foreign laboratories. And what I've gathered from certainly the conversations with you and other people in Canada and people in other countries, and what I know about US law, is the NIH actually has an illegal loophole that we're suing them over right now that exempts foreign animal laboratories getting NIH money from the same oversight that US laboratories have. So as soon as that money goes out the door to foreign laboratories, the US government doesn't inspect these laboratories. And over 40 years of funding foreign labs, the US government has never inspected a single foreign laboratory that it was giving money to. So there's a total information blackout when it comes to what's actually happening in these labs to animals with our money once the checks are written. So the numbers are astonishing and disturbing, but then we don't even know in a lot of cases what's being done to animals in laboratories, even in the US, but certainly in foreign countries. And I've got a couple
we
examples.
don't know in Canada. We don't even know. There's no transparency. We don't know exactly what species are being used in what facilities, private or public. And of course, the private laboratories in Canada need not report to the Canadian Council on Animal Care, so that they could be in all of our backyards and nobody needs to know about it.
Yeah, and we have the same problem in the United States, you know, at least in Canada, despite, again, a lot of reporting deficiencies, you count all the animals in laboratories, the species in the laboratories that are reporting. In the US, we don't count mice and rats, not reliably.
Right, that's right. Yes.
And they make up, mice, rats, fish, and other cold-blooded animals make up about 99% of the animals in laboratories. Really here in the United States. So yeah,
we count them. We count them, but the only places in Canada that need report are the ones that get government funding. The private labs don't have to report that.
Yeah, and we have some similar problems here. So lots of money being spent, taxpayers' money. And if you look at public opinion polls over the last 20 years, certainly a majority of the US public opposes animal testing, but the government is forcing us to fund it, especially when we know how incredibly better now than ever, not only how much animals suffer in labs, but how wasteful and inefficient it is. So the problem is worse than it's ever been. Fortunately, we're making progress, but there's still a long way to go. And again, part of the problem here is that a lot of this money is being spent places where it's simply totally unaccountable to the US government and taxpayers, unfortunately. And that's the way the government wants it. That's by design. That's a feature, not a glitch. So one example we uncovered is a laboratory working with the MIT and Georgia Tech. This is Dalhousie University in Canada. And here is a screenshot from a paper they published. And this is a lab up in Canada where they're sewing kittens' eyes shut to cause them vision disorders and blindness, and keeping them blind for almost a year to look at what damage that causes their brains when they get no light into their eyes. And this is not only being funded by 2 different US grants from the National Institutes of Health, but also a grant from the Canadian Institute of Health Research. And this is one of those examples of grants where the money is going to US institutions, and then they are subcontracting out in certain parts of the experiment, outsourcing some of the experiment to the lab in Canada. And even in the US applications, they know that the cat testing is a sensitive issue, and they say, well, it would really be unethical for us to do the cat experiments. So then they outsource it to Canada. And then you see when the papers are being published, oh, the grant funding is actually supporting this collaboration. But they minimize the concerns raised by the US reviewers. Not that we don't do plenty of testing on cats and dogs here in the United States, but they know it's a sensitive issue, so they try to downplay it, and in this case, outsourcing it to Dalhousie University. And this was one of the examples that was included in that World Animal News story that ran at the end of last week about the investigation that we'd be doing in Canadian labs that White Coat Waste and the Beagle Alliance were included in. Another example, something similar at the University of Sherbrooke in Quebec. This is another collaboration with Georgia Tech University, where they are giving cats spinal cord injuries and forcing them to walk on treadmills. Again, this is an example of a grant that went to a US institution, and then they subcontract out and send the money to this university to do the more invasive and harmful experiments on cats with way less oversight. And just to kind of give another twist in how hard it is to actually follow the money to these laboratories, here's an example of a grant. This is a contract that was given to a pharmaceutical company in Australia to do R&D for a new opioid withdrawal drug. So this money went to an Australian pharmaceutical company. I don't know, we have obviously big problems with the US government funding pharmaceutical companies that can pay for their own research. I don't know why taxpayers are paying for that, because then we're going to be forced to pay for the drugs and give them tax breaks for their advertising. It's just so corrupt. But we
and
got
also they're the richest industry in the world. So why would taxpayers be spending?
Yeah, the current administration has said that they'd stop funding pharmaceutical R&D. Hasn't happened yet, unfortunately. But so this is an example. This is a screenshot of a document we got through the Freedom of Information Act from the National Institutes of Health, showing that they sent $1 million to a pharmaceutical company in Australia that subcontracted out toxicity tests on dogs to a redacted, we don't know the exact name, for-hire contract testing lab in Canada. And these were experiments where they were giving dogs, beagles, increasingly high doses of an experimental drug to treat opioid withdrawal, to see how it affected their brain activity, if it caused seizures, etc. So this is the receipt. $1 million went to this company and was then spent specifically on this dog study in Canada. And we don't even know what the name of the Canadian company is. We don't know exactly where that money went. And we wouldn't even know this money went. It's not public knowledge unless you know to go to the government, the specific documents to ask for, and to fight the government when they tell you we're not giving them to you. We also have to file lawsuits regularly to get them to turn over these documents, simply to know how our money was spent. So this was another grant, recently active grant for, again, dog testing in Canada. I gave you some other examples of cat testing in Canada. And these are not isolated examples. Like I said, there's 500 grants and contracts over the last decade, simply, direct money to Canadian laboratories coming from the US government. These are other examples from things that we get through the Freedom of Information Act, through our investigations. And again, this is all just kind of through the F part of what we do, the find. This is a contract that was given to a Chinese laboratory where they were testing drugs on 300 beagle dogs a week. And this is the exact justification from their application that successfully got them money. Beagle dogs are docile, cute, and easy to domesticate. That's why we pick them. Of course, we know that's ghoulish, but these people are honest, at least sometimes. This is an example of one of the lawsuits we file for documents from in this case, filing a lawsuit for dog, cat, and primate testing records from the NIH. Sometimes we're lucky and we get photos and videos. As an example, this cat was in a US government laboratory in Cleveland that we ultimately shut down. But this is a photo they took in the laboratory and had on their hard drive. They never published it, but through the Freedom of Information Act, through a lawsuit, we were able to get copies of what was on that hard drive related to this project. And this was one of the images that was in there. So that's the find part. We're using all these different methods to triangulate information and figure out what is happening in these laboratories with our money, both in the United States and abroad. Then there's the exposed piece, and that's awareness raising, right? That's, we can do investigations all day long, but if nobody knows about them, we can't make the change we want to see. So then a big part of what we do and what I do as the head of the communications department is exposing. So here's the headline from World Animal News last week. The story's been doing really well and getting shared a lot on social media about the dog and cat testing that the US NIH is funding up in Canada based on our recent investigations. We've also been documenting how, despite the current US National Institutes of Health leadership saying in last July, that they would phase out dog and cat testing and that the problem predates them, the NIH has continued to issue brand new grants and contracts and renew old ones, spending tens of millions of more dollars on experiments on dogs and cats, both in the United States and foreign countries. So here's a Guardian headline from one of the exclusive we worked on with them about the continuing funding for dog testing. We worked with them more recently on an investigation looking specifically at cat labs and how, despite the NIH's promises, it's continued to fund these cat labs.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about that too, because from our perspective, and I'll speak I don't want to speak for all Canadians, obviously, but it appears that the NIH is making forward steps in, compassion, ending testing on dogs, all of that. But then we hear this. So, and I mean, so it's not happening. It's not happening, is what you're saying.
No, the rhetoric doesn't match reality at all at the NIH. And the NIH is honestly an outlier among federal agencies right now. They're the biggest funder of animal testing. They're still the biggest funder of animal testing. And they've made a lot of misleading statements to the public about what they intend to do and what they have done. One of the first things we did when the new administration came into power and Jay Bhattacharya and this woman, Nicole Klein-Stroyer, came into leadership at NIH, we alerted Jay, the current NIH director, to the fact that there was a lab we had been investigating for 10 years that was giving septic shock to dogs. 2,100 beagles were killed in this laboratory inside the NIH headquarters. And at the end of 2024, we discovered that it was in a transition period and there were actually no dogs in that laboratory. So when the new administration came into power, we said to them, one of the first things you can do, easy win, simply don't let this lab get started up again. So there weren't any dogs in that lab at the time. But one of the first things Jay Bhattacharya announced was that they were closing this lab down, which was great. There was one laboratory in NIH headquarters. It was the last laboratory dog lab across the federal government inside a government lab. We had shut down the rest of them over the last decade. Unfortunately, that same thing has not happened yet for any of the other hundreds of labs that they fund at colleges and universities and private companies, both in the US and abroad. So because of pressure from us and the public and from members of Congress, NIH said in July, these programs all predate us and we're going to phase them out. And that simply wasn't true. They continued to give new grants since then. So the problem does not predate them. And they've continued to renew funding for projects that predate them, even though they're not required to by law. So we are in a bit of a battle with the NIH right now. And unfortunately, a lot of other organizations have befriended the NIH and have access and what I would say have been captured by the agency and are not publicly criticizing them for this because they want to work with them and, be in the room for conversations. But I'm interested in results. The NIH has actually not made a single commitment to end any animal testing. They said that they're going to look to do it. They're going to look to reduce it. They're going to put changes in. They haven't done anything like that. So as far as I'm concerned, you put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to say you're going to reduce animal testing, stop funding it, set a timeline, set a deadline, set benchmarks. Nothing like that has happened at the NIH. Other agencies have done that. The NIH hasn't. So yeah, so we've been very vocally criticizing them because we had high hopes. Jay Bhattacharya is an old supporter of ours, but they're really lagging behind, and it's disappointing. But meanwhile, and I'll give a couple other examples, at the Department of Defense, at a lot of other different federal agencies, there's way more progress being made. Dog and cat experiments are being canceled overnight. Animals are being adopted out. So there's a lot of great progress happening, and we're hoping the NIH does catch up. So
disappointing and just disillusioning. And I see Jean, you have your hand up. So hi, Jean, nice to see you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Jean.
Sorry, I do want to wait till the end to ask my question, but it's so pertinent now. I thought with Doge that maybe this would come into play with NIH funding. Did that not have any?
So Doge, we worked closely with Doge and cut a lot of funding for animal experiments, some at NIH, but that had nothing to do with NIH leadership. That was Doge and Elon going in and cutting things. That wasn't the NIH leadership doing that.
Okay. So when he left, they just went back to
a lot of stuff. The progress to kind of slash and burn at federal agencies slowed down significantly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, yeah, and again, other agencies, it's been a different story, but that's certainly been the case at the NIH. Yeah. But here's again, we're talking about kind of the exposed part of things here. I showed you that 300 beagles a week snippet. This is an example. This is a New York Post headline about our investigation. working with members of Congress to end the funding there. Here's another story. I've tried to focus kind of on the foreign lab stuff and Gateway Pundit. Gateway Pundit is a conservative online outlet that's one of the most highly trafficked and visited websites in the press in the United States. They get over 1 billion views a year. And they consistently cover our work about wasteful spending on animal testing. And they covered recently, this is a story from October about our ongoing investigation into foreign funding for laboratories. And again, again, focusing on the foreign stuff, there's some other headlines from a few years ago about us investigating the foreign funding. In addition to working with the press, we do ad campaigns. I'll talk a little more about this specific lab in a minute, but this was a USDA laboratory that was doing kitten experiments, and we had to actually sue the municipal bus company because the transit authority did not want us to run ads embarrassing the local government because so many of the employees ride their buses. So we actually had to sue them under the First Amendment and saying they had no right to refuse our ads, and we ultimately won and forced them to run these advertisements on trains and buses all around the city that were servicing the USDA headquarters. We work closely with Congress. This is me testifying just about a year ago in US Congress at a House Oversight hearing. And this is a post from a conservative member of Congress commenting on, the reason I put the slide here is because I was talking about that cat lab that was mentioned in the advertisement. There was a lab that for decades, they were going to China and other foreign countries, buying dog and cat meat at wet markets, flying it back to the United States, and then force feeding it to kittens and cannibalism experiments. And we shut that down, exposed it and shut it down during the first Trump administration, adopted out all those cats. There were about 30 cats left in the lab. They all got adopted out. And here a member of Congress, not only am I testifying about it, but there's a member of Congress there was a moment where I was talking about how the experimenter ended up in the USDA Hall of Fame. So this member of Congress is commenting on the fact that this person who did the kitten cannibalism experiments ended up in the USDA Hall of Fame, which is kind of a great example of the perverse incentives of animal experimentation. That's what, cats with kitten cannibalism got you.
Okay, so forgive my, to what end? To what end is this?
So these were experiments related to toxoplasmosis, and they wanted to see if exotic meats sold in wet markets around the world might be able to transmit toxoplasmosis to people who ate it. And the only way to do that at the time, or for many decades, the way that they would test meat to see if it had it was to have cats eat it, collect their poop out of the litter box to see if the parasites were in there, and then kill the cats.
Okay.
And they in this laboratory alone, they killed 3,000 cats to do that.
Well,
so we shut it down.
That beagle looks very unimpressed and bored with all of it.
That's an Indigo beagle, actually. That's Oliver.
Of course.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then here's an example. This is the Secretary of Defense, U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and we worked with his team to make him aware of some of the cat experiments that the DoD was funding. Let's see if we can get the sound to work on this.
Oh, perfect. No sound, Justin. Do you have a link to that? Yeah,
I'll send a link, but basically he's making fun of experiments that the DoD was funding where they were putting marbles up cats' butts and then electroshocking them in constipation experiments.
Is it? Can you hear it on your end? Can you hear it on your end?
I can hear it, but
that's okay. I'm wondering why we can't hear it. Okay, that's
right.
Too bad.
I'll share it. No problem. So this is an oversight hearing about wasteful spending at the DoD, and one example he gives is this cat experiment. So that's my job as an advocate, is to get the most powerful people in the country who have the authority to make the change, not only aware of the problem, but to be on your side and then actually do the thing we want them to do.
Yeah.
And we've been able to do that not only with Pete Hegseth at the DoD, but across many federal agencies. And that's where the defund comes in, right? So now Pete Hegseth is on TV. He's in this hearing talking about this cruel and stupid experiment that he heard about. We need him now to take the next step and do something about it. So we unite the left and the right. We are a bipartisan group. We work with everybody. Freedom Caucus, these are members of the progressive, the far left squad in the United States, and the political party, the political caucus that's the furthest left there is. And we work with people like Rand Paul, who obviously very conservative, hates government spending. And we unite them around issues of whether they care about wasteful spending or animal cruelty or both. We're able to bring people to the left and the right together to fix this problem.
Yeah.
And
that's perfect. That's what needs to happen. It needs to be, all the parties need to come together, and that's the issue in Canada as well. And it's nice to see John there.
Yeah, there's John Anuno, Rand Paul, and here's me and Laura Loomer, who's like a very conservative political influencer in the United States, and Abe Hamadeh, a member of Congress, and we're in Abe's office with another Envigo Beagle here, talking about working to end dog testing at the DoD, because this member of Congress, Abe Hamadeh, is on the Defense Department's Oversight Committee, and he wanted to know how he could help.
That's not Uno? Who is that?
This is Oliver.
Okay.
That's Oliver, who I'm going to be in Capitol Hill tomorrow with Oliver, actually. And then we have places like the New York Times talking about how white coat waste has been able to get this issue on the top of the priority list for the Trump administration. And here, the DoD, we see Pete Hegseth talking about these stupid experiments. Laura Loomer tweets about it, and the DoD's official Twitter account overnight. Well, this is 2 weeks after the investigation broke. We have May 2nd, Laura Loomer posts about our investigation. 2 weeks later, the DoD official account tweets where this is canceled, all DoD waste is being removed. And they canceled that $10 million for those cat experiments. Wow. And after this, they actually went in and canceled a very long list of $57 million worth of dog and cat experiments that we provided the DOJ office at the DoD.
That's incredible. That's just amazing.
Yeah, we recently got the Navy to issue the first ban in the U.S. across the U.S. government of any testing on cats and dogs. Mm-hmm. Here's the DoD spokeswoman. This is not, I'm not going to play the video because it didn't work, but she specifically credits us in her interview for getting this on the DoD's radar. And actually, just 3 weeks ago, or almost a month ago, we got Congress to enact and President Trump to sign legislation that cuts funding for all Defense Department painful experiments on dogs and cats. Again, that's the first time that the government has ever passed a law saying that you couldn't spend money on painful experiments on dogs and cats. And we were able to do it at the DoD. A few years ago, we did it at the VA. We canceled dog, cat, and primate testing funding at the Department of Veterans Affairs in the US. We've ended some funding for dog testing at the NIH, but again, like I said, that we're still working to crack that nut. And we're working on legislation now. If the agencies don't make the change themselves, we then work with Congress to force them to do it. Yeah. So we have a bipartisan bill that would defund the dog and cat testing at the NIH as well. And we've been working on our lab animal retirement legislation, a bill called Violet's Law, named after a dog one of our board members rescued from a laboratory, that would make lab animal retirement an option in all federal labs. And these are two cats that came out of that USDA kitten cannibalism lab. They were in there for a decade. They were used as breeders. This is Petite and Delilah. Petite, who's on the right, passed away a couple years ago, but Delilah is still going strong. She lives with our president and founder. He adopted both of them. And then we recently, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now, we shut down another cat laboratory funded by the NIH. And this is Mochi and Marigold, who also we were able to get adopted out of that laboratory with the help of Kindness Ranch, who went in and took all the cats, and our team adopted a couple of them. So we've had a lot of success. I love giving this little snippet because it kind of is a ringing endorsement. These are people at the Department of Veterans Affairs complaining about us and saying that we've succeeded where other groups haven't because we brought together the left and the right, combining a message about wasteful spending with being nice to puppies and kittens, which, I mean, who can resist that? So yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing in the US. We're trying to, again, we're a US organization. We're trying to cut the funding for our laboratories here, but also cut the funding going to places like Canada to help you solve the problem up there as well, because a lot of those labs, as we can see, are being, the reason they exist is because they're getting tax dollars from the US government.
And who knew? Who knew? I mean, honestly, I did not know that, in a world where this is, I mean, primarily as a rescue, our focus is placing animals in homes, specifically beagles, into homes after research, but also advocating for animal-free science. So we make it our business to advocate and to find out where these dogs are and to hopefully have them released to us. But I don't think in a million years I would have thought. I knew that there were American organizations in Canada and operating, etc., but I would have never imagined that amount of money was being funneled into Canada from the NIH. I just want to jump on something. This was taken off your website, Justin, because it's actually staggering, the work you guys have done. It's incredible, really. White Coast Waste, I'm going to read it right verbatim, is the most effective organization for getting animals out of labs. We've rescued, spared, and impacted and saved over 29,000 lives and cut 99 million in wasteful spending and shut down over 114 labs and experiments. I mean, I got nothing.
That was pre Trump 2.0 also, and we've cut hundreds of millions since the beginning of last year as well, and saved thousands of more. So yeah, we should update. We're building a new website.
Yeah,
right
there
now,
you
so
go. There you go. You need to update that, because that
no,
is.
I mean, I'm incredibly proud of what we do. I mean, we've shifted public opinion significantly. When White Coat Waste got started, when Anthony launched this group, so the founder and president of White Coat Waste worked in an animal lab as a teenager. He thought he wanted to go to med school. He got an internship at an animal lab and was horrified and quit and thought, one day I'm going to figure out how to work on this problem. He went to work in politics, kind of put together a toolkit. He was like, oh, I'm working on these political campaigns on other issues. We could apply those same types of strategies and tactics to working on the animal testing problem. And that's how we got started. And there was a need in the United States, and I think this is probably the case in a lot of places. There was a need to widen the tent on the issue politically, because it was really seen as a left-wing thing. And there were a lot of people who felt politically homeless in the animal movement, that they didn't agree with the broad agenda of a lot of the big animal rights groups who work on a million different issues. And if you're not in line with all of those things, you feel alienated and ostracized. And so Anthony started a fanatically single issue organization that has no political litmus test. We don't even have a litmus test when it comes to other animal issues. We are very welcoming to people, regardless of how they feel about other animal issues and if they eat meat. We're for libertarians and vegetarians and all kinds of people. We don't really care, because the animals need all the help they can get. And having that type of disciplined messaging and being so focused, you see public opinion in the United States. When White Coat got started, there was a 20-point opinion gap between Democrats and Republicans on animal testing. Republicans were 20 points more likely to support it. That opinion gap has been completely eliminated, where equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats and majorities on both sides now oppose animal testing. And that's because we kind of opened up, we created a home for people. But whether it's members of Congress, whether it's grassroots activists, whether it's the press, we gave people a place where they can come get information and kind of feel like their values are reflected more broadly. So yeah, I'm incredibly proud of the work we do, and I've been doing it for a long time, and it kind of feels like we're really just getting started, because this idea has been mainstreamed. We took this idea from something that was like a fringe issue before on Capitol Hill to high politics. We have the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the USDA, the Secretary of the Navy, Elon Musk, the President of the United States talking RFK, NIH, FDA. All these people are talking about animal testing. That has never, ever happened before in history. Donald Trump, regardless of what people think about him more broadly and his opinions about other things and positions on other things, he's the first president ever who spoke about animal testing and said the right things and did the right things. So it's an incredible moment. And that's why we're kind of being aggressive with agencies like the NIH, because this moment is not going to last forever. You know,
Agreed.
this government's not going to last forever. We've got to want, there's only a few more years left. We don't know who's going to be in there next. And they're probably not going to have the appetite for radical reforms in the government like this administration has. So this is the moment to get things done.
I agree. I think I really do. And I fundamentally, and Jean, I see your hand up, and I fundamentally believe that this is the tipping point. And I do even believe it's the tipping point in Canada as well, where we're just going to flip over, and it may be slow going forward, but it is the tipping point. I agree with you on this administration in the US, and I also agree, and I think it started with Envigo a little bit, because whatever divisiveness existed after what went on with COVID, each party came together and they shoved all the differences aside and went, oh my goodness, this is going on with these dogs. And I want to use that for a moment to step off onto what the Beagle Alliance says and has said for years, is that the end of animal testing begins with the dogs, because there's no other animal that touches the heart in our collective culture like the dogs. And that doesn't mean that we stop testing on dogs and shift it over to other animals. It doesn't mean that we're ignoring other species. It's not about being vegetarian or vegan or whatever your stand is with regard to making a world better for animals. I can appreciate all of that. But the majority, when you're going to reach the majority, it is through the love that we have for dogs. And that's how we're going to spread awareness. And I think that's how, I know in Canada with the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, we had some exposés here where whistleblowers came forward, and it really took, it got some steam because it was dogs. And the Premier came forward because it was dogs and cats. And it was, I think that's where the tipping point is going to happen in 2026. And it doesn't mean that we're going to magically change and it's all going to go away. But I agree with you where this is the moment. This is a moment we have to really get it out in front.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what happened in the US. I mean, when we launched our campaigns 10 years ago, 2016 is when we launched. White Coat had been started on paper and was kind of brewing. But we launched our campaigns 10 years ago, 2016, and chose dogs because, for the exact reason you describe, it's an issue everybody can connect to, regardless of how they feel about other animals or animal testing in general. Dogs is an issue people can relate to and grabs their attention. And we saw the same thing happen here in 2021, even prior to Envigo, the stuff with Dr. Fauci and the Beagle testing. And again, whatever people feel about Dr. Fauci as a guy in general on other issues, when it comes to animal testing, I will go down to the mat fighting that he is the worst villain for animals and laboratories in history, just because the amount of time that he was doing animal experiments from the 70s until 2022, when he left the NIH, he was still doing experiments on monkeys himself. He was the lead experimenter on several projects with monkeys, and he had billions and $6.5 billion that he controlled, a majority of which he spent on animal testing every year. So in terms of a public enemy number one when it came to animals and laboratories, he was that guy. And when we exposed the Beagle testing that he was funding in labs around the world, that is what made the issue of animal testing in the United States go viral. That's when you saw Donald Trump Jr. and Joe Rogan and Elon Musk and all of these people talking about animal testing. And I work to get all animals out of laboratories, but the things that captures people's attention and imagination is the abuse of animals, the abuse of dogs specifically, and cats to a great degree, but not the same as dogs. And we take crap from animal rights groups for that.
Yeah.
For saying, just recognizing the reality of the situation, that people have a special connection to dogs. And that's not just, that's tens of thousands of years of coevolution. That's not, it's not speciesism, that's evolution. We evolved together.
Agreed.
So, and again, they're the gateway. They're the gateway to everything else we want to accomplish.
Yes. Yes,
And they
I
become the
agree.
proxy for animal testing in general.
Yeah.
When people think of animal testing, they think of dogs.
Agreed. And not only that, and they are the gateway, and I've used that exact term and spoken about this. And you're right, because we've taken flack for that as well. And primarily, I mean, this is we call ourselves the Beagle Alliance. We advocate for animal-free science, and we would certainly help place any animals that we could out of testing. But obviously our expertise is with dogs, and that's, where what we work with, and those are the animals that we are blessed to be able to place. But that's the thing, is that when you are an advocate, spreading awareness is key. Obviously, it's part of advocacy, and reaching the majority is key. And the bottom line is it doesn't matter whether it's ethical or it doesn't matter whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise. The fact of the matter is that no animal in our culture touches the heart like the dog. We live with them. We tattoo their names on our bodies. We grieve their loss. We take them to doggy daycare, to vacation. We plan our entire lives around our dogs, and we all know it. And if you are not a person who's in love with your dog, you sure as heck know someone who is.
Yeah.
And we have to reach the majority to make change. And the majority in a democratic society are the ones that need to say to the government, it is you who must reflect our values.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I can tell you, and you know this, and I know this from the last 20 years of my work, is that the work I've done on dog testing issues is what gets me in the room with people to talk about other things.
Yeah.
And gets them to do what we need to get done for other animals, whether they're mice, rats, primates, cats, rabbits, whoever it is. I mean, the EPA is adopting out rats and fish right now. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, I didn't think I'd see the day that happened.
Yeah.
And exactly. we're there, and it's in a large, very big way. It's because of what we've been able to do, raising awareness about the issue of dogs and labs. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking because I could go on a rant, obviously, and you guys know that. But Jean, you had your hand up, so sorry.
No, thank you. And thank you, Justin, for being here. I'm so happy to meet you and hear you speak. And I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing. I get all your information, and I follow what you're doing. This political climate is so wrought with conflict. The fact that you can work with both sides, to me, is just phenomenal. I actually saw a Facebook post from someone talking about the NIH reducing funding for animal testing, and it was there's a preemptive comment: please don't shoot the messenger because it's Trump, and I imagine that you're going to encounter the same thing, maybe even worse, in Canada. The division there seems even worse than it is in the US. So this isn't a question, it's a compliment. I just really appreciate what you're doing. And this is the one area where I feel like perhaps we can get the polarized sides politically to come together. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for your support and your kind words. And yeah, I mean, we rely on people like you across the country to, again, this is, for us, it's an issue of, taxpayers, to your point, Lori, speaking out about how they want their values to be reflected in the way the government operates. And this is an area where there's a disconnect. We have the government spending our money in ways that most people find abhorrent. And we have a voice now. We have people in government who are listening, who are on the same page, and are in some cases doing what they can do to make dramatic reforms in a very short period of time. So I'm thrilled. I mean, at the end of the day, this is my issue. It's been my issue for my entire adult life. Basically, half my life has been spent doing this, and I will work with anybody. And I don't ask them what their opinion is on other things. I don't care. The animals don't care. If they don't even have to oppose all animal testing. If you only want to
Yeah.
work on dogs and you don't care about other animals, that's fine. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, that's fine, as long as you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, if your house is on fire, you don't, if the firefighter comes to your house, you don't ask them who they voted for. You're just glad they showed up.
Yeah.
So it's the same with animals. Like, I'm willing to work with anybody across the political spectrum, regardless of how my views and theirs on other things jive or what our members think. We've done things that were unpopular even with our members because it was the right thing to do. And in the end, we usually are right, that it was a good strategic decision, and people see that in the end. But sometimes, you know, that people raise eyebrows, like, oh, you're working with them. And it's like, there's a reason for it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's happened. And Jean, I appreciate your observation, because it's true. Canada views itself, and Mark, I see your question. So I haven't not, I'm going to get to you, sorry, in the chat. But I appreciate that, Jean, because, you know, Canada has an interesting view about itself. You know, we think we're nicer than you guys. I mentioned that, you know, when we spoke at Kindness Ranch. And, you know, we like to believe that this is not happening, but the division is very, very clear. And I'm the same as you, Justin. I don't care what you believe on anything else. If you're going to help the animals, then let's have the conversation. And I also want to touch on the fact that animal testing is not just an animal welfare issue. This is a societal issue. So if you are not in love with animals, then no worries, you can jump on board, because your child is not going to get cured of leukemia using the animal use model that's already been proven. Your great grandmother isn't going to be cured of Alzheimer's using the animal use model. This is already, we already know there's other ways of doing things that are less expensive, more effective, etc. So, you know, for some of the, and I'll use it loosely, some of the left, or in Canada, the Liberals, who think that this is animal rights jumping up and down. This is a societal issue that really does affect every single person. There's no party attached to it. You don't, it's not it's not an effective method, and it's harming animals for no reason. It's not giving the results that people think that it's giving when, you know, the grocery store asks you for the $2 for whatever society. And so I just think there's a broader way that we can even spread awareness about it to touch everybody, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, I would argue, and, you know, a lot of US federal agencies now believe we lived through the worst case scenario of animal testing, which is US funding animal testing in a foreign country that's completely unaccountable, that causes a pandemic and kills 20 million people. You know, when people think about the COVID lab leak, I don't think, you know, this was our I'd say probably our claim to fame when it all comes down to it, when me and Anthony are, well, when I'm totally bald and we're gray, is that we exposed the NIH's funding for that laboratory. And that was animal experimentation. They were going in the wild, capturing bats, harvesting viruses from them, and then injecting those viruses into mice to soup them up and make them more deadly to people. That was animal experimentation funded by US taxpayers that went wrong. And many authorities believe caused the pandemic that killed 20 million people and cost, you know, trillions of dollars in damage and crippled the global economy. That's the worst case scenario. That's beyond whether or not you're going to get a safe and effective drug. You know, that's beyond just the animal welfare issues. That's causing a global pandemic. And we've lived through that. And that opened up a lot of people's eyes to truly, what are we doing in these laboratories? You know, there's actually someone on this call. I mean, their job is to sugarcoat animal experimentation, scare people, fearmonger into thinking that they need this or their family is going to suffer, when it's a lie. And the worst case scenario is it will actually kill people. And we've seen that happen. And that's what opened up so many people's eyes to what is the NIH? What is it as an institution? What is it doing with our money? And does it really have our best interest in mind? And I think a lot of people learned that maybe it doesn't. And that's why the Trump administration and so many members of Congress have come down so hard on the NIH, because they feel like it basically gets a $50 billion blank check every year. And there's a horrible return on investment for the taxpayers who are footing the bill for that.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, that entire Wuhan lab is connected to Manitoba, interestingly enough, too. That's a whole other thing, but there's a connection there. Mark is asking, what can we do from our end? So Mark, I'm assuming you're in the United States, because you're asking if you know, we contact our congressman, and you're in, oh, I'm sorry, I just see now you're in Tennessee. So yes, you are in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do we make a difference? How do we have our voice heard, Justin, in your opinion?
So follow us on social media, first of all, at White Coat Waste on all the platforms, especially if you're on X. We're very active there. I'm personally active on there, Justin R. Goodman. But we have petitions set up where you can send automatic letters directly to your House member and to senators about all of the main campaigns we have. And those don't just go into the ether in some black hole and never get seen. Those go directly into congressional offices. And then we follow up and we send mail to I write to those offices and say, our members have been contacting you about X issue. Will you sign on to this piece of legislation? Will you attend this event? Will you sign on to this letter? But the only way one of the best ways we can motivate members of Congress to take action is if they know their constituents, people who live in their district or live in their state, want them to do something about that. So I encourage you, if you go to whitecoatwaste.org, which is our main website, again, it's about to be relaunched, but you can join our mailing list there, and you'll get all kinds of petitions sent to you asking you to send letters to your members of Congress. And that's the best thing you can do. We are also a small nonprofit. We have a tiny fraction of the budgets of the big animal rights groups in the United States. And the overwhelming majority of our revenue comes from small dollar donations from people. So we need doers and donors. So if you want to support our work, if you want to donate, I'm here to support Beagle Alliance, so give them your money. But if you have some left over after that, I'll take it.
Some of our money just went to adopting 2 beagles at Kindness Ranch. So yes.
Amazing.
I love it. Awesome.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh,
Amazing.
that's awesome.
Amazing. My wife and I barely got out of there without a dog a couple months ago. It was a close call.
And who did you adopt?
Yeah.
So we adopted, I'm Lily, by the way, but it's my husband, Mark.
Lily.
So we adopted one that was named Hera and the other one Artemis.
Oh my gosh.
Now Willow and Cheyenne.
So cool.
Great names.
Well, and Kindness Ranch is our partners, so we're there so many times a year and working with them to get dogs. And honestly, our partnership has made such a difference in Canada. I say to John and Kindness all the time that without even trying, they've made a difference in Canada, because we've been able to spread awareness just by bringing dogs here. The Canadian labs aren't releasing to us currently. There's no legislation or protections for animals in research in Canada. So whatever issues go on in the United States, Canada is even further behind with that. But because of a couple of exposés this year, there is a little bit more of political movement, and we are hoping that there is a change afoot, but so much more to do. And we've been really blessed to be able to work with Kindness and just get more dogs out of labs wherever they are. We always say dogs know no borders. So the dogs don't care where they're, who cares? Let's all just get the dogs out and get them into homes wherever they are. So we've been really lucky that way. So yeah.
Lori, I'm wondering if this is a good moment to plug Stacy's talk.
I was going to plug exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Great
because
minds.
we have been, we try to do these town halls. We've just over the years have had, we have the best guests, and of course they all do this on their own time. And so, yes, I'm excited. And even though she's hiding behind her camera, the beautiful and brilliant Dr. Stacy Lopresti Goodman is going to be our February town hall speaker, talking about the trends in use of dogs in research over decades. And so she has so much to bring to the table, and we're just excited because, again, we just want to go with this momentum of how much is out there and what White Coat Waste has done. And we really just want to keep the focus on the dogs in testing because, as we say, they are the gateway for all change for animals. So we're excited. So please, you guys, we're at the hour mark, which, and I don't see any other questions. So again, pop onto our join us link, whatever. You'll see town halls there. You'll see the link to register for Stacy's town hall in February. We have an extra town hall we're doing as well with our friend Melanie Kaplan. So she's a journalist and author of Lab Dogs. So she's going to be here January 31st as well. We kind of popped her in because we wanted to talk about her book. Otherwise, we would just love to see you on social. So, you know, as Justin said, follow, like, share. I mean, social media is such a powerful world now that this is the way we can spread awareness. So we would love for you guys to do that with White Coat and do that with the Beagle Alliance and do that with Kindness Ranch. And this is the tipping point. I really believe it. And I cannot thank you enough, Justin, for what you do. I think we need to clone you here and make you a Canadian citizen so that you can, you know, just like run amok all over Canada.
The taxes here are bad enough.
Yeah. Well, hey, don't get me started. Don't get me started. That's a whole other town hall.
Well, I think I agree that we're at a tipping point, and I think that I've also seen the pro-animal testing people, at least here in the United States, over the past decades, but certainly over the past few years, go through the stages of grief. And I think they are now at the stage of acceptance, where they see the writing on the wall that this is happening. Their industry is dying, and they got to figure out something else to do. And that's very telling to me.
Yeah.
So no, we're on the right track where there's the political will to do what we all want to see happen. We just have to, get the job done and see it through. So yeah. I'm grateful to everyone on this call for coming, spending an hour with us on a weeknight, and for Lori for putting it on and all her incredible work for Beagles in Canada. And for my wife for signing on in her PJs and hanging out with us. Yeah, she just
said if I wasn't in my PJs, I'd be on camera. I just thought that.
But her presentation is also going to be, she's an expert in PTSD and dog rescue from laboratories and has published a lot of research on that. She published the first papers looking at actual behavior of dogs rescued from labs versus non-lab dogs, specifically beagles. So she's got a lot of information and wisdom to share. So yeah, I'll be on that one in my PJs next time.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I'm so grateful. And it was great to actually get to meet you guys at Kindness, and that'll happen again soon.
And shout out to Brenda. I see Brenda. She's
do you see Brenda? Yeah.
Hi, Brenda. Brenda's amazing. The dynamic duo, Lori and Brenda.
Transport queens, right?
That's right.
Waiting to be on the road again. But
amazing. You're amazing. Animals are lucky to have you. Well, Canada's lucky to have you. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for coming and joining our town halls. It's a blessing because really, as cliche as it sounds, it does take the village, and you guys are the village. So I appreciate you, love you guys, and hopefully you'll join us for our next town halls, in or out of pajamas, whatever you want to do. So thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll talk soon. Okay. Bye guys.